The Things We All Carry is a podcast about first responders and their stories surrounding trauma on the job. The intention of this podcast is to raise awareness and share meaningful conversation around a subject often viewed as taboo or simply ignored. Be aware this content may be graphic and it is real. It may not be suitable for children or adults triggered by this subject matter.
Hello,
What's your name and where you're from?
my name's Cody and I live in Bel Air, Maryland.
And my question today is something that came out of the episode I'm editing for tomorrow's release, and it has to do with attracting talent to the fire service. And I think that this has been a theme across the country, and so I just wanted to get people's opinions. Has the specter or the idea of firefighting or being a firefighter, has it lost its luster?
I don't think so. I think it's evolving over time, and I think we kind of just have to try and target the newer generation, but I still think it's just as honorable and just as exciting as it was back in the 60s, you know?
So you said it, you attracted a new generation. How do we do that? What changes can we make that would attract a generation that might be less willing to take these jobs of service?
I feel like probably a big thing is obviously everyone's in social media. So, you know, getting a good PIO department or audio and visual department that is good at editing, you know, have them show up to fire grounds, take videos of people doing the stuff, you know, and then that way you can throw that on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram, make the job look exciting, tell them what's in it for them. As well as also trying to make the point across that it's honorable. You know, you're going to be putting yourself on the line for your brothers and the people that you serve.
My name is Brandon, and I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio.
The luster of being a firefighter, is it fading away?
I don't think it's so much fading away, where I think it's more that there's less people willing to do this job. I think it's part of, you know, there's a lot of studies come out of our cancer risks, our sleep involvement, you know, personal, you know, hits we take just to do this job. And I think that our society's kind of shifted to where there's less people like us that are willing to do these things for strangers.
Okay. So in your mind, this is a societal thing.
I think so. Like, you know, everyone that I have the pleasure of working with, at least, like everyone absolutely loves the job, and you know, our brotherhood and everything is still very much alive between all of us. But my department, we're struggling to fill holes.
So how can we adapt as a fire service? Because we're seeing a dwindling number of applicants, and so if the applicant pool is dwindling, so is the quality.
Absolutely. I think if we kind of took a look at a changing of how we can do things to better serve our members, and it's you're seeing it starting now with mental health, you know, help, and some people changing to, you know, 4896s and looking at different shift schedules to better suit members on our personal lives. So I'd say I feel like at least we're kind of moving in a direction to where maybe some of these things could be addressed, maybe not at a fast enough speed.
Well, that makes sense. And we don't change fast as a fire service.
Right.
Curtis, Hounsville, Kentucky.
Has the fire service or this aura of being a firefighter, has it lost its luster? Are people not attracted to it anymore?
I think it has. I think years ago, people got into fire service because they wanted to help their community. You know, they wanted to be servants of the community to make their area better. But now I feel like it's more just people are coming to it because it's a job. And I feel like we're losing it as we get into these newer generations, kind of the willingness to serve your community.
So what changes can we make as a fire service? Because we need people to still do the job.
I'm not sure. I think some of it is just trying to make like the one guy you had from Miami where, you know, they they did the opposite and they made the standard tires, just try to make your department stand out that you have this, this, and this. Like, just try to raise your standard and say, okay, if you come here, you're going to be, we want you because we want the best.
Yeah. So raise the bar and the cream will rise to the top.
Yes.
What's your name? Where are you from?
My name is Brad Schrieffer, and I live on the Eastern Shore of Maryland.
And what I want to know is, has being a firefighter or joining the fire service lost its luster?
For me personally, no, it hasn't. But I feel from maybe the dawn of like technology, it's easier to maybe show off that you're in. And maybe that degrades a little bit of what it meant to be in the fire department.
Explain that. Explain what you mean there.
So, I mean, I guess like when I started young in the fire service as a volunteer. We didn't have social media. So you didn't have this avenue of broadcasting it to anybody with a smart device to say that you were there. Like, you were little fish in a little pond. And now that little fish in a little pond can just post an Instagram picture or Facebook or whatever platform they decide to use. And now everybody sees that they're in the fire department. Like and that's not to say everybody does that, but I feel like some people are like, yep, I'm here, I'm in, I'm one of the brotherhood or the sisterhood, and I deserve all this credit. And, maybe people aren't really earning their stripes like they used to, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. So what can a fire department or the fire service in general do to attract good talent at a younger age? So we're seeing 18, 20-year-olds coming into the fire service, and the talent pool that we have to select from is much shallower than it was just 5 years ago. But so not just are the numbers shallow, but quality is shallow at times as well.
Cool. I don't know if there is an answer for that. It's tough. I mean, I've seen where people come in and they don't have maybe just the personal makeup to do this job long term, but they see decent pay, they see a niche schedule, free time, and good benefits. And as long as I hang around for 20 years or 30 years, I'll get those benefits forever. And I feel like there's also been a big push on education. That education is like a point on the hiring process, that we've gotten people in that aren't familiar with working with their hands. They just want to be, high paid people. So they have these college educations and they come in and they're not ready to work. They're not ready for those long nights. They're not ready for, I just ran a fire and now I got to come back and clean up all the gear and get my stuff ready, get myself cleaned up, and then finish cleaning up dinner. That they're like, oh, the day's done. Like, now it's just time to sit back and relax. I don't know if that's just been a generational gap. I don't know if it's, lack of hard work early in life. But like that, maybe work ethic is just the hardest part.
So, and I think you're kind of along the lines of the other people I've asked this question to. It's kind of a combination. The fire service isn't changing for the times, but then there's a societal issue going on as well. So you've kind of got two bulls kind of headbutting each other a little bit.
Right. I mean, like the work in the fire department hasn't changed, right? The technology has changed, which makes some things easier, some things a little more difficult. But at the end of the day, it's a lot of guys say it's a young man's job, right? It's bull work. It's long hours. It's just strenuous work. And I don't think people realize that when they get hired or they apply. They think like, oh, I just saw the firefighters at the grocery store. I saw them riding down the road. I see this, but they don't see that extra part. And then when they get here, they're like, oh, no, I didn't really sign up for that part. I just signed up for the glamorous part of it, or the benefits, or, this or that, or because my family member was a firefighter and they talk so highly of it. Like, I'm just here for the cool parts, not the bulwark, the strenuous hard part.
So it's the old adage, everybody wants to do truck shit until they have to do truck shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody wants it until they got to put their money where their mouth is.
Right. Awesome. That's perfect. Hey, go be safe out there, man.
All right, brother. Sound good.
Welcome back to another episode of The Things We All Carry. Last week was kind of funny. I had made mention of interviewing people for this question that I had about, is the fire service losing its luster? Is the attraction not as strong as it used to be for people to come and take this job? Not even just the fire service, but we'll talk any kind of service-oriented job. And by service, I just mean service to your community or your nation. So military, cops, firefighters, medics, whatever. Any kind of those service jobs require some sort of a sacrifice to perform the job, or potentially the ultimate sacrifice to perform the job. And so my question was posed to a couple of friends and listeners and followers, and it was basically that. Is this job losing its luster, and what can we do about it? And I kicked myself as soon as I sat down Wednesday morning just to check to see, okay, I do this thing every time I release a show. I will download it just to hear it, at least to hear a portion of it, just to make sure things sound okay. And so I pushed play last Wednesday morning, and as soon as I started listening to it, I went, oh, damn it. Because I forgot to attach the file I wanted to attach. I forgot to attach the interview that I did with a few people. And it felt ridiculous because here I am, 2.5 years into doing this podcast gig, and I still screwed it up. And so I texted one of the guys I had talked to, and his Brad from Maryland, and I said, dude, I screwed up. I can't believe I did it. What a dumb thing to do. And he's like, what's the harm? Who cares? So you pick it up next time and you fix it. And it's so refreshing to feel that and hear that, because that's exactly what I needed to do. Who cares? I get to play it for you this week, and you've heard it, and we rock on. And that's exactly how I need to approach life. Hey, I'm not going to get it perfect. I am not going to get it perfect anytime, not just most of the time or sometimes. I'm just not going to get it perfect. It's not what I am. It's not who I am, but I am that person willing to learn from those mistakes. And so I know that I have to get some of that stuff done in a better fashion. I had to put a call out for people to take my call earlier in the week. So it's not just a last minute thing, which anyone who knows me at all knows that I love last minute things, and I love to change things last minute. It keeps it interesting, I'll tell you that, but it doesn't keep it always smooth. So it's stuff that I have to work on, that I need to improve on my end to make it better for guests, for callers, for listeners, and anybody down that line. And so that's what I'm doing. Obviously, I'm a work in progress. I always say that. I will never deny it. And I don't think that's ever going to change. And if it does, I think there might be trouble, because I'm never going to settle for what I am or who I am. And I don't think any of us should. We should always strive to become better and more proficient and just know what we're doing in life, in work, in general, just to know it better and have a clearer picture of where we're headed. And, I've said it numerous times on this show that, over the few months, that finding out where I'm headed part isn't always easy. And so that's a work in progress. Just, okay, where do I want to go from here? And that's a question that's popped up a few times. And I don't know, there are things, there's a book idea, there's another podcast idea, and I'm getting to work on those. And that's something that excites me. And there's a gentleman up in Canada I've been talking to, and he's got one hell of a story. And I think that his story deserves a platform to itself. And so there's a consideration in the works for a standalone show based on that story. And it would be one of those kind of like a serial type telling of his story. And so that at the same time fascinates me and petrifies me, because it's a huge undertaking, but
damn it, I want to do it. And so that first step was taken because he's in Canada, and that story is there. And I realized my passport was expired, which is a whole nother story. It's been expired for 5 years. So this morning I went and I applied for a new passport. And the fact of the matter is, I'm looking to do some traveling, to do some writing, to branch off. And it's an exciting moment for me right now because I'm trying to plan it out and how to do it, kind of map it out and organize it in my head and organize it on paper. So I'm going to do a little writing. I'll submit it to a couple of magazines, a couple of publications, and see what happens. That's something completely and wholly new to me, it's also exciting, also kind of intimidating. It's one thing to publish it on my Substack. It's another thing to put it out on a publication that is spread much wider and deeper than my Substack ever will be. This week is part 2 of my conversation with Bruce. And this is episode 132 of The Things We All Carry. In this episode, Bruce continues to talk about his career and how it progresses. And one of the things he talks about is one of those major calls that affected him. And as with a lot of people, this call involved a child. And he had a child of the same age at home. And so he in his brain and in his emotion, he related what he'd witnessed on the job to the son he has at home. So he talks about how he reacted to that, whether it's bad or good, and what he should have done and who he should have turned to instead of what he did. One of the things that interests me about Bruce is the fact that he takes these things, he learns from them, he improves himself, but he also improves the leadership he gives to his folks at work. And he gets into that. He gets into how you can be a better leader and work on this expression of mental health in the workplace, and what he can do as a battalion chief to allow people to know that it's an open door and he is there for you, and he's not looking to punish you. He wants to establish that communication. He wants to make sure that there are resources and that he is one of those resources. And Bruce will openly admit that he made mistakes early on in his career. He stepped on his toes a couple of times, but that's where this learned from. This is where he garnered this approach to it. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation because that's what it was. It was a conversation. It wasn't just me listening. It was more of an interaction, and I appreciated that. And I hope you guys appreciate it. I hope you're getting something from it. And once again, let me know. Let me know what you think. Let me know, how the show impacts you. Do me a favor, listen to the show, download it, share it with friends, share it with family. Let's get it out there. Let's get this story out to people so people are hearing it. People are realizing they are not alone, that we all have these things. We're all going through them, and it's not that you are alone. I say it again. Your trauma is unique, but your story is universal. Let's tell our stories so everyone knows that we're all going through it. So y'all sit back, enjoy, and then when you get a chance, get outside and go do something for yourselves. You get hired in what year as a career firefighter?
September 3rd, 1996.
Okay. And
back in the 1900s.
Yeah, way back in the 1900s. You graduate in 1997 in January, and you come out, and like you're assigned to an engine right out of recruit school.
Engine 12.
How does that progress for you? What do you find? Do you find it's what you wanted? Do you find like immediately you know it, or is it something you have to grow into?
I find out that I have a slight problem with authority, but nothing that couldn't be overcome. I loved what I was doing.
Right.
I mean, instantly, I loved what I was doing. But I guess I knew I was going to love it anyway, because, like I said, I loved being a firefighter.
Right.
And I've always said, and continue to say till the day I die, is that if volunteering paid the bills, I'd still be doing that. Right. I'd love the people I ran with. I enjoyed doing it.
Right.
The unfortunate part is that being a volunteer didn't pay the bills.
Yeah.
This was going to pay the bills, and I was going to get to do what I loved,
right.
and what apparently I'd always wanted to do since kindergarten. So the best of everything came together for me with this. Yeah.
So you mentioned that the beauty of the fire department for you was that there was a new challenge every couple of few years.
Yeah.
But you kind of seek that out as you go into fire department yourself, though, because you learn different positions and you seek out those different positions.
I do.
So let's kind of go through a little bit of your career. How did you progress through
All right.
those trainings? Because those trainings are what keep us interested.
Yeah.
Well, I won't say everybody. Not everybody wants them, but a lot of people go, okay, what can I learn next? What can I learn next? What can I learn next?
Right.
And the fire department does afford that opportunity.
Absolutely does. It absolutely does. And you're right. There are those people who get very comfortable where they are and they stop seeking out those other opportunities. And sometimes I wonder if they understand what they've missed, right? Like you may go to one opportunity and no, it wasn't what I really thought it was going to be or what I wanted. Okay, well then move back toward another one or
Right.
move the other direction, right? It's that opportunity to grow and that opportunity to learn is going to carry me well beyond retirement, right? Like I think about all of the other jobs I could get into after I leave the fire service because let's face it, I'm not going to retire at 53 and just sit around or 54 and just sit around for the rest of my life, right? I want to do things. I want to be involved in things. So I'll find something to fill the empty time. And one of those things may be a job. And, you talk to some of the retirees that are out there now and they're actively doing things. They've used those certifications that they got in the fire department and they've applied them to other industries and they're being successful in those other industries because of what they learned in the fire service. So, my career, wow. So, I went to Engine 12 right out of recruit school. The end of my first year, the captain came to me and said, "Where do you want to go?" And I was like, "I don't want to go anywhere. I'm having a blast right here on Engine 12."
Right.
And he said, "That's not what I asked you." He said, I said, "Where do you want to go?" He said, "Because if you don't pick someplace, the department's going to pick it for you."
Right.
We're another recruit school is graduating. We're getting a recruit.
Right.
You've got to move. And I said, well, the timing of it was pretty good for me because the Tech 1 who was assigned to the truck had recently left to go to another jurisdiction in Maryland where they lived. Made perfect sense to me. So I said, well, then how about I go to the truck? And the Tech 2 and the lieutenant on the truck at the time were like, yeah, we'll take him. Right. So I wound up going to Truck 12. Spent about a year and a half on Truck 12. What's interesting is that as soon as I got there, the Tech 2 who was there, they transferred him to the rescue. And so for the first 6 months of my assignment there, it was me as a Tech 1 and the lieutenant who were assigned to the truck. And every day we'd have a new detail.
Right.
So every day I was out there doing checkout and showing them emergency operations of the aerial so that if they were in the basket and something went down and I wasn't around, they could at least get themselves out of a little bit of trouble. While I was on the truck, I decided, you know what? I want to be a paramedic. Yeah, I laughed at that note too. And here's the thing. When I made the decision to become a paramedic, the Station 12 had 3 medics assigned to the engine. They had 2 medics on the medic unit and they had 1 medic on the truck. There were medics everywhere.
Right.
And so my vision, right, was that now not only do I have the technical rescue capabilities of rope and that high angle rescue aspect and all of those other things that we were involved in, but now I can do the patient care part of it too. Like I can do both. And of course, you get the true rescue guys who are like, you shouldn't be doing patient care. You need to tend the basket and tend this and da-da-da-da-da. And then you get the paramedics who are like, you shouldn't be doing this, this, and this. And I'm like, wait, so I have to choose one or the other. So if I'm suspended in the air with a patient in a Stokes basket, my only focus is the Stokes basket, even if the patient's dying.
Right.
Or the patient, even if the rope is coming untied, right? Like, and why can't I focus on both? Anyway, so I go to medic school. I do my internship on Medic 12. Went the entire internship and didn't run a single code, not a single one. My first day back to the truck, and the truck was 7 to 5. Then every other unit in the station was 6 to 6. This truck was still 7 to 5. So I got to come in an hour late, leave an hour early every day.
Right.
I just had to work 5 days instead of 4. My very first day, I'm driving in and the engine and the medic are next door at the dialysis center doing CPR.
Right.
Right. They're running a code. And I'm like, maybe it's just me, right? Like, I think I carry that white cloud around with me because there's only certain combinations of people that I'm running with where bad things happen to other people.
Right.
But if it's just me, yeah, not so much. I think I'm the safest thing and the best hire that Prince William's ever had just because the citizens seem to be safer when I'm around. Maybe it's because they're scared.
Maybe it's because they're scared.
It's-
So you become a medic after 2 years, correct?
yeah, roughly.
2 or 3?
Yeah. So basically end of third year.
Where do you go after you become a medic? You go to the truck, but you don't stay there, do you?
I went back to the truck right after my internship, and then I got a phone call one day from the office that said, "Hey, we want to promote you to Tech 2 on Medic 3." And so I went to Medic 3. We were Medic 3 for a year, and then it went to Medic 53 because it went 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I wound up spending 2 more years there. Now I've been in it at this point 5 or 6 years, and I haven't worked for the same supervisor yet.
And, you know, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't cover what's going on in your personal life at the same time, because while you were a volunteer, you met your wife.
I did, in a volunteer house.
Right.
Yeah, at a firehouse. And I still send her a picture. Every time I go by that firehouse, I still send her a picture of the general area where the couch was, where we met, or where she was sitting when we met.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So that was, well, you can put me on the spot here. So we got married in 93.
Okay.
So I met her as a volunteer. We both volunteered. I met her in 93. I met her in 92. And then we were married in 93. And so here we are however many years later.
Yeah, I'll let you do the math.
It's 30. It's going to be 31 this year. I used to have it on the inside of my ring.
There you go.
Just so I could pull it off and go, oh yeah, September 18th, 1993. Got it.
And the reason that I wanted to go back and highlight your personal life is because we don't operate in vacuums.
Right.
In the fire service, nobody operates in vacuums. I mean, hell, nobody operates in, whether fire service, law enforcement, military, a trauma nurse, trauma surgeon, it doesn't matter. Nobody operates in a vacuum. You have your life in and out of whatever you do. And your life out was your wife, and you were having children.
Yeah. So, by the time I got hired, we had one. We had our oldest daughter. I got hired, and then 2 years into my career, we had my son. So 98 was when he was.
And the reason that's important is because of the call that kind of affects you and kind of changes how you approach some things.
Yeah. It's definitely important to the timeline that we're getting ready to discuss. So, and I'll never forget, I was still assigned to the truck. We were out of the academy doing some training, and a guy by the name of Richard Kerr, lieutenant out of the training academy, came out to the pad, and he walked up and he said, "Mr. Tucker, March 4th is going to be a day you'll remember for the rest of your life." And the immediate thought was, whatever we just did, I failed it and I'm getting fired. And he said, "You're going to be a father." And I mean, just, I guess the color drained out of me, the panic set in. I'm like, I'm at the Prince William County Public Safety Academy in Nokesville, and my wife is at a hospital in Woodbridge.
Right.
And I'm on a ladder truck.
Yeah.
And how am I going to get there? Because we're training. They're not just going to stop training for me. Right. And Lieutenant Kerr looked at me. He goes, "Calm down." Like, he could see it. He said, "Calm down." He said, "I have a motor pool vehicle waiting for you out back. Because when you get to the hospital, leave the keys under the mat, leave it unlocked. We'll come get it later." And I'm like, this is the definition of family, right? Like, they bent over and they just like, go. Like, we'll take care of the rest of this. Just go. So we went to the hospital, and we had our son. Yeah. So yeah, that's when I was on the truck. Like I said, I got promoted, moved to the medic. And interestingly enough, I put in a letter to go to every medic unit in the county except for 3 and 7.
Right.
Obviously we have more now than we did then, but I put in a letter to go to everywhere but 3 and 7. And I want to make sure that everybody understands the letter didn't exclude those. It was just that I wrote a letter for every medic unit, and I sent it to the officers on those units. When they called and asked me if I wanted to accept a promotion on Medic 3, I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm going to take the promotion, right? So I get down there, and probably within the first month, I got a phone call that said, hey, we're going to put you on an extended detail to the 2nd Battalion, and you're going to go spend 2 days a week at 7 and 2 days a week at 13. So not only did I get transferred to the place I didn't want to go, but now I was being put on an extended detail where half my time would be spent on the other unit I didn't want to go to.
The other place you didn't want.
Right. You don't want to do that? Then you're going to go do
Right.
that, right? And you know what? It's a challenge,
Right.
right? They recognized I need challenge, and they said, here, we're going to challenge
Yeah,
you.
we'll give you something.
Yeah. And honestly, it wasn't terrible, right? But I would go to 7, and I would ride with one medic one day, and then the next day I would ride with their partner. And then the next day I would be at 13 and ride with one of them, and the next day I would ride with their partner, and then the next day was my regular day off during the week, right?
Right.
So that rotation happened until Memorial Day weekend. And then that Friday was my last day. I was at 7. We wind up getting hit on an auto accident out on 234. And it was in an area where there is no medic unit. So the first unit there was the engine. The second unit there was a tanker from that station. And we happened to pull in third. And the captain on the engine at that time was one of the calmest people I know. Right? But when we pulled up, John opened my door before we stopped. And I knew that it was just going to be terrible, right? Because it just wasn't like him. He didn't do that. And he basically said, we've got a car down there. It has 2 adults and a kid in it. He said, there's another kid, and he pointed behind the unit. And I'm like, wait, how did this happen? So I looked at my partner and I said, hey, go up there and find out what's going on with that car. Apparently there's 3 patients up there. Just get a quick evaluation. I'm going to go back there and check on this kid. And as I rounded the back of the medic unit, I grabbed the bags, and as I rounded the back of the medic unit, a firefighter from the engine was pulling out an ambu bag. Started to bag him. I'm like, this isn't going to be good at all. So here's this child laying in the road, and I'm just trying to determine, like, how did he get here, right? And so all these passerbys there's just this huge crowd of people around, because at the time it was a 2-lane road. Yeah. And the accident, the way the accident happened was they had been traveling in a direction, traffic had stopped in front of them. They weren't going to be able to stop in time. And instead of pulling to the right into the ditch, they pulled to the left, and there was a car coming the other way, and they just T-boned it. So there was a car seat laying there in the road, and then there's a kid laying there as well. And I'm like, so did the car seat come out of the car? What happened? It turns out that some bystander had pulled the car seat out of the car, carried it down the road. I'm not sure where they were going or what they were trying to do. I think maybe they were just trying to get out of traffic or whatever, but they had carried it down the road, and they'd set it down when the engine pulled up. And so the engine crew had actually pulled the kid out, putting all those pieces together. And that day, they had called for 2 helicopters right away. It just so happened that this child was sitting on the passenger side in the back seat. And then the other critical patient had been in the passenger side in the front seat, was an adult patient. They had called for 2 helicopters. Helicopter was coming in, it was a UH-1, right? So it's a big helicopter. And they're like,
massive helicopter.
We can take 2 patients. Okay, well, we only have 2 patients. So you're going to take both patients. It wasn't until they got on the ground that they said, and we're going to need to take some people with us. And at the time, that was extremely frowned upon by the department. They absolutely did not want any of their providers being put onto helicopters and taken out of service. You're putting medic unit out of service every time you do it. Well, they needed 2 people. So, Technician 2 Wood and myself climbed on a helicopter, and we flew to Fairfax with them. The interesting thing is they don't fly you back.
No. And there was no Uber.
Yeah, there was no Uber, right? Our Uber was a guy coming in one of the yellow training vans that we used to have, and all the way up to Fairfax, and picking us up in rush hour and driving us back.
The only thing better would have been if it was the same vehicle that they let you use to drive to your son's birth. So
I'm pretty sure that was like an 88 Cavalier.
No,
There was a motor pool vehicle.
not the same. Never
Yeah,
mind.
yeah. So, yeah, where are we? We're 4 years,
Well,
three or 4 years into my career, and I'm on a helicopter flying to Fairfax Hospital with this kid who was laryngospasm, and so we couldn't get him tubed. We tried a couple different things. IVs weren't like IOs were very different than they are today, right? It was manual. You had to put it in, and now you're dealing with a kid and you're trying to put this in. And my partner and I, we did a lot of things, and a lot of things that weren't successful. And so when you get into this job, you don't get into it. You definitely don't wake up in the morning and go, I'm going to hurt somebody today. But you wake up and you go, I want to do everything I can to make sure that I help somebody.
Right.
And it just seemed like everything we did didn't help. Right. And it wasn't necessarily that the intervention didn't help. It was that we weren't able to do it successfully, quickly, all of those things that you're trying to do as a medic, and you're just not being successful. All those things you've trained in and done, and you've done them on other patients. You've done it 10, 15, 100 times. And now all of a sudden you're not being successful, and not necessarily because you're inept. It's not because you're inept. You're doing the job. It's just that the patient isn't cooperating. Like I said, the laryngospasms, we probably shouldn't even been in his airway at that point, right? Like as soon as we saw his vocal cords clapping together, we probably should have, all right, well, we're going to let the helicopter take care of this. But you just knew the desperate situation there. And so, we put him on a helicopter, we fly him up to Fairfax, get in the van, we take that long ass ride home. And, I get home and I get to the door, and there's my 10-month-old son. Same age as this kid. I just put it on a helicopter and just took to Fairfax. And he says, Daddy. And he opens up his arms and he comes running to me, and I just broke down in tears. Like I hadn't cried in a long time. Yes, Aaron, should tell you, I'm a hollow rock, right? Or at least I used to be. I'm a
Secret's getting out.
That's right. Secret's getting out. So I just broke down. I mean, I absolutely sobbed. And Erin meets me at the door, and she's like, hey, what's going on? And I tell her. And the next day, I was going to a wedding. Somebody in the department was getting married, and I was going to that wedding. And for whatever reason, I just decided, you know what? I don't want you to go with me. I'm going to go to this wedding, and some friends are going to pick me up, and they're going to take me, and they'll bring me home later. And I honestly don't even know to this day why I didn't take her with me that day. Because as we talked about before we started this today, right, is that glass of water. And for those that don't know, whenever I have a couple bourbons and I start talking in cursive, as she likes to say, she'll set down a glass of water in front of me. And so I guess now looking back on that, I didn't take my glass of water that day. And there came a point during the reception where there was a few inches left in the bottom of a handle. And somehow a bet got made that I wouldn't finish it. And I think it was like $35 was on the table, and I proved them all wrong.
Right.
And don't remember much after that.
You wouldn't.
Yeah.
Did you get your money though?
Honestly, I don't remember.
See?
All right. I'm pretty sure I picked it up and stuck it right in my pocket. It's not saying that somebody didn't take it back later, but I remember having a few conversations with people, and I remember just that feeling of complete failure, right? And this kid's still in the hospital because it's the weekend. And like I said, it's a 3-day weekend. So now I have extra time to really kind of get in some extra alcohol or whatever else I need to help me push down whatever it was that I thought I was feeling. So, yeah, I woke up the next morning at home, had no idea how I got there. Aaron was mad at me. My glass of water was angry that I didn't drink it. And then, come Monday morning, I got the news that he had passed away. And that just made it even worse, right? Is that now it was a constant feeling of every time I looked at my son, that family was never going to get to see that, never going to
Right.
get to experience anything from that point forward. And I remember it was probably a couple weeks later, my daughter graduated from preschool, right? And it was complete with a cap and gown and the whole
Right.
9 yards. And I'm sitting in this chair watching these kids and I'm just crying. Like I can't control it. I have no idea. At that point, I'm not even sure I know how I'm going to move forward, right? Like, so, I went back to work Tuesday morning, um, and Battalion Chief just happened to stop by the station that day, and I was sleeping. Time it was frowned upon to sleep because you know you don't sleep during the day.
Yeah.
Now, at that point, we were a 24-hour unit. I think it doesn't matter. I was sleeping at noon, and he walked in, and I remember him rubbing the underside of my chin, and I opened my eyes, and he's standing there, and he sat down, and we talked for a while, and my partner at the time down in Meg 3, we all sat there and we talked, and everybody's like, okay, great, have a nice day, and he left. Wednesday morning, my supervisor comes back to work, and he goes, hey, were you sleeping yesterday? He's like, yeah. He goes, all right, well, I'm going to have to write you up for that. And I'm like, for what? And like, for sleeping. And so I start to explain to him what happened over the weekend. Or on that Friday, and then over the weekend, and how things were going for me. And that turned into okay, I will get back to you. And came back and said, okay, well, here's your mandatory referral to EAP.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, I mean, since you're making me go, sure, I'll go. And then even with that today, right, the mandatory referral isn't, they're not going to tell you what comes out of it, but they're just going to report, yes, they showed up. It's
Right.
not a positive outcome, a negative outcome. It's just they showed up. They did exactly what you asked them to. Here we go. And I remember sitting down and meeting with the person, and nothing against them. I'm sure they're great therapists. The problem is that they have no idea what the fire service is like.
Right.
And a lot of times we hear stories like the one I just told or that I'm telling, and we think it's one call. Well, sure, it's one call. That's that one call. What about that fire back in 1990, whatever, where 3 people died? And what about this call and that call and this call and that call? And now we've hit one that hits home because there's a very real piece to compare. And
Right.
For me, I just watched a 10-month-old die, and I've got a 10-month-old sitting here in front of me. Right. And so as we move forward, right, like that therapist really just didn't do anything.
No.
Right. We spent most of that session just trying to get them to figure out what it is I did for a living and understand the difference between doing that and working in an office.
Exactly.
9 to 5.
Right.
And the stresses that come with that. So I really kind of left that appointment with no real closure or anything like that. And it carried on for a couple months where song would come on the radio and I'd just break down in tears. And then, my kid would have an accomplishment and I couldn't feel happy about it.
Right.
It was one of those times it was just dark. And I guess the positive out of it is like, I never thought about like self-harm or anything like that. I just couldn't get out of this funk. And at the time, looking back on it, right, alcohol was really kind of the answer, right? Like if you drink enough, you don't feel. So if you drink till you don't feel, you're good.
You're cured, right?
The problem is the feel comes back. So you got to drink a little more.
Mm-hmm.
And then you build the tolerance. So you're drinking a little more. And I won't say that I got to a point of alcoholism. Like even today, I'll sit down and have a drink, right? Like I have a whole collection of bourbon downstairs that I'm very proud of and looking forward to having in retirement. But at that time, it was definitely one of those things where I felt like I wasn't going to function without it. The only time I think that I did fine without alcohol was when I was at work. and my mind was on the next call or the next call. It wasn't on what's happened already. It was being able to move forward. Looking back, I think that the fire service in general has come a long, long way in helping its members. And I know when we talked last, we talked about, what kind of motivated me to do this, right? And tell my story. And quite honestly, your show, people like Travis Howe, and just listening to some of the podcasts that you've done with some of the members and some of those calls that were traumatic for them. I'm like, wait, I was there.
Right.
Right. And I definitely handled that very differently than they handled that, and understanding. And I think that pointing this out and getting people to talk about it and helping one another understand and cope with the various things that go through, it is extremely important.
Hey guys, a quick break right here just to check in and thank each of you for listening to the show. Your support has been paramount, and I appreciate all of you. I have one request, though. I need you to share the show with everyone you know. Help me get the word out and spread these stories as far and as wide as we can. While you're at it, please leave a review of the show wherever you happen to listen. Feel free to reach out to me at any time to share your story, to talk, or to pass on suggestions. Let's get on with the rest of the show.
We had a call recently where some of our members were struggling with the outcome. And I looked at it and I think to myself, it didn't impact me that way.
Right.
Like, it didn't impact me. But I also remember back to when I was impacted by this call that didn't impact these other people.
Exactly.
And what did I need at that point? Right. Like, and I told one of the people, I said, listen, I'll never know what you're feeling at a given moment. I won't. Right. Because your emotions are going to go up and down like a roller coaster. I said, but what I can tell you is that I've been there. I've been on that roller coaster before. And I can tell you some of the things that I did or I had to change and and some of the pitfalls, right? Like, stay away from the bottom. Don't go there, because that's not going to help you. The biggest thing is get your story out there. Talk to somebody who's not in this, but at least understands it.
Right.
And that's why I think having our Resilience Center, right, is that there's people who are familiar with the fire service. They're not in the fire service, but they're familiar enough with the fire service that when you tell them a story, they understand that trauma and how it differs from the day to day.
Right.
So,
and we're lucky. I mean, in that Resilience Center, there we have a few people that us as firefighters or former firefighters can turn to and have absolute trust in, and they do understand and they do get where we're coming from and why some of the stuff is an issue and why something might not be an issue. I want to go back to the kid that you had to fly out, and it was your son's age. You say it turned your perspective, that call itself. What was your perspective before that call, and what's your perspective after that call then?
I think my perspective from before that call was, we're going to save everyone, right? Like, I'm unbeatable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm truly unbeatable. Like, I'm a paramedic. I'm a firefighter. I have rope 3, fine space, trench rescue. And I have more certificates and training than you can shake a stick at. And so for me, it was not only did I don't want to say I felt invincible, but there was definitely a aspect where that invisibility stood out. Right. And I think what hit me so hard was the fact that this was a kid. This was the beginning of life.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And now it ceased right then and there. I think that when we see the elderly pass away from natural causes after, 80, 90 years, that's expected, right? I think that a 10-month-old, nobody expects.
Mm-hmm.
And it really kind of shook my world, because in all honesty, that was, besides that fire, and again, me being as green as I was and not as involved as I was, it just didn't have that impact on me that it did some of those other guys. This was my first impact of a young child who I was supposed to help.
Right.
Right. And I didn't. looking back, I understand I did. But
Right.
at that time, I didn't help this kid.
So I'm trying to think of where I was going to go with that. And I think that one of the things you said is you felt invincible. You had all the training in the world. You could do anything. And I think a lot of us carry that belief with us. Even if you don't have all the training, you're so confident in what you are trained in that you know that, well, you don't know it, but you come in with the belief that I can save everybody. Where I had to have it reframed for me to be, instead of thinking I should have saved that person, is did I do what I know to the best of my ability? And if I did, then I did my job.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very key reframing for people, especially for young people who were coming in thinking, I got this.
It's interesting you say that, because this recent incident, right, is that was the advice, right? That as I gave this person a hug, basically I told them in their ear, like, one, just they were headed home, like, be thankful for your family. Go home, give them a hug, tell them you love them, just be thankful for them. But the second thing is know that you did everything you could,
Right,
in your power, to give that family an opportunity. And in the end of the day, the outcome of the call overall wasn't the best, right? They wound up losing 2 children,
right,
but the family had that opportunity to be with those children and say their goodbyes,
right.
right? And that is a powerful, powerful thing.
It's a massive thing, and it's I hope that people can wrap their brains around what that is. Yeah, you do your job to the best of your ability, and the outcome is not up to you, but you did affect some change no
Right.
matter what. And so the sooner young firefighters or young medics get their brains around that, the better they're going to be in their career, I think.
Yeah.
One of the things you said is you had to learn to trust people after that call. What did you mean by that? And I'm going to guess that was a huge undertaking for you after your childhood.
There's a lot of combinations leading up to that. Yeah, certainly. So like I said, right, my wife had always called me the hollow rock. And even today, well, for several years, I think until my father passed away, I rarely showed a lot of emotion. In fact, my youngest child having a conversation one day with someone, and they looked at me and said, "You need to smile more." And without missing a beat, my youngest daughter looks up at me, looks at them and goes, "He is." Right? Because they know I smile with my eyes, right? Like, sure, I laugh and I have a good time,
Right.
but there's a time where I just don't show a lot of emotion. And that's always kind of been the way, I think, because showing emotion makes you vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So trusting people has always kind of been hard, based on that relationship, like the youth or the abuse, right? Is that how do grown people do that to kids, right? And it's hard to trust that people are going to be looking out for your best interest, no matter what, right? And you combine that with the fact that I showed up at work and was struggling, and their answer was, "We're going to send you over here to see this person,"
Right.
as a more of a form of discipline than it was actual assistance.
Right.
It wasn't a recognition that I was having a problem or I was struggling with something. It was more of a, you didn't follow the rules and now we have to punish you for that. And so here's what we're going to do.
Right.
So even there, like, I'm like, who do I turn to? And at the time, I didn't, and still to an extent today, I don't bring work home with me. This case, I absolutely did. I brought it in the door. I laid it on the floor, and my wife, bless her, right? She hadn't dealt with that,
Yeah.
right? I didn't do this before. So now she's trying to learn how to help me, and she wants to be there for me, but even though we're married and even though she's the love of my life, and I'll tell you, she's my soulmate, she's my moon, she's my stars, I don't know that I actually trusted her at that point. Right. And not because she hadn't earned it. Like, she had done everything she could as a human to earn it. I think that it's just where I was in my life. Right?
Mhm.
So moving through it, and I got to say that this probably wound up being one of the strengthening points of our relationship, is because even after I was a complete ass and I left her at home and I went out and got drunk and,
Right.
I just stopped talking to her, and she's still here.
Right.
Here we are 30 years down the road, and well, not since then, but you're right. What's that? 28 years
Right.
down the road, and she's still here. Like, yeah, she's a keeper.
Yeah. You met someone as stubborn as you are.
Apparently. So yeah, I guess between the childhood, all the way up to the point where I moved out of my house, right? Like, I never felt like I could trust people
Right.
in general. And then to have my employer just kind of pile on that I don't think there was ill intent by any
Right.
stretch of the imagination. It's just that we didn't know, right? None of us knew.
I think that's one of the questions I was going to ask you is you've spent this chunk of time in the same department and you've seen an evolution. You've seen a couple of evolutions, to be honest with you. But the mental health part of that has, well, actually, I don't know. I'll ask you, what's that evolution been in the department in your eyes? What's that evolution been for mental health?
That evolution has been huge. It's amazing, right? We had peer support then. The thing with peer support is it typically was something that was forced.
Mm-hmm.
It was a major incident happened. There were a lot of people involved. We're going to have a debriefing, and we'd pull everybody into a room and we'd sit in
Right.
a circle and we'd all talk about what we did. And there'd be maybe some coping mechanisms coming out of it, just depending on who the counselors were in it, who the peers were. Because usually there was some sort of therapist there as well.
Mhm.
And most of the time that team had people who were pretty well trained and familiar with the fire service. But the follow-up wasn't necessarily always there.
Right.
Because we all know that we can sit here and talk for hours about a call without saying anything,
Mm-hmm.
right? Without showing anything.
Right.
And then you get up and leave the room, and who's following up with you?
Right.
Who's coming back to go, hey, you really didn't say much. You said a lot, but you didn't say anything. So why don't we sit down and talk one-on-one, right? And I think that's one of the biggest things now is that we tend to look after each other a little better, having an understanding, because 90s fire service is very different, right? Is that we were all about the suck it up.
Right.
Because you think about it and I thought about this earlier today. I grew up in the generation of latchkeys, right? You figured it out. You just do it yourself. Get it done, right? And so we approached mental health the same way. It was like, just, you're a latchkey, figure it out,
Mm-hmm.
get it done,
Right.
right? Moving on. We got calls to run. And I got to say that I've had the pleasure of working with some people in the peer support realm that were some really forward thinkers throughout the years. One of the programs that the department did years ago was they partnered up with CSB, and they assigned a clinician to each station. One clinician may have 2 or 3 stations.
Mm-hmm.
But the concept was that here's this person who has background in therapy, who you've been introduced to, who comes around semi-regularly, brings ice cream or cookies or whatever, sits down at the kitchen table and has general conversation. You invite them to lunch or,
Mm-hmm.
But there's somebody that you're familiar with talking with who already has that background in that clinician background. And so they called it Adopt a Firehouse, and
Mm-hmm.
the clinician would adopt a firehouse, and When tragedy struck, if you walked into the firehouse and that person was sitting there, it didn't freak you out. There wasn't just some stranger sitting at the table waiting for you to come in and talk about your feelings. It was somebody who was sitting there that you had talked to before. And now they're just sitting there. They weren't pushing their way in. But if you wanted to sit down and talk, they were there for you. And you knew who they were. I would say that would be the first major step beyond CISM, CISD, whatever we called it, right? The peer support aspect. And then the advent of the Resiliency Center for us, man, that's huge. In fact, this most recent incident, it was literally, I picked up the phone and said, hey, Lisa, this is what I got. This is what I'm dealing with. This is what I've done. This is what I'm going to do.
Right.
And I want to make sure that they have your number. And so we talked through some things and she's like, listen, I'm not reaching out to them. If you give them my information, you can encourage them to reach out, but let them reach out on their own.
Right.
And I'm like, wait, I mean, I don't have to go, we're mandatorily referring you to the EAP.
Yeah.
Right. That is huge.
Yeah.
You know, it's a service that's there without being there. Right. It's not in your face.
Right.
But when it's time, the only thing that the only downside or the only hiccup, speed bump that might exist, right, is somebody else not recognizing that someone needs to talk to them and making that link for them. Because we still are a proud group. And there's still a point where somebody else is going to have to initiate that connection.
Right.
It just can't be forced. Right. It's just got to be one of those like, hey, I really think you should pick up the phone.
Yeah.
You know what? Why don't you call Brendan Stack? Right. Or why don't you call Lisa DeMarco? Or why don't you call Bruce Tucker? Right. Just call somebody, talk to him.
I'll vouch for Lisa. Call Lisa. Lisa's one of the few people that's ever stood up to me and called me on bullshit. And it's one of the few people I'm comfortable in this world crying in front of. So she's been my therapist for a few years now. So I vouch for Lisa. She's one hell of a person and one hell of a therapist.
Yeah.
So how have you changed with your approach to mental health as you've gone through the years? Not just the department's approach, your approach.
Yeah. I've learned to balance my checkbook, man.
Okay. Explain that.
So listen, life is just like a checkbook, right? We are constantly writing out withdrawals. And occasionally we get a deposit. Every couple of weeks we get a deposit, right? Learning to increase the number of deposits and decrease the number of withdrawals and keeping that balance. You know, I've read a lot on this lately about the whole 50-50 in a relationship. Mm-hmm. And I think this is why Aaron and I are so successful now, right? Is that our marriage, our relationship isn't 50-50. And quite honestly, I don't know any successful relationship, even friendships, that are 50-50, right? They're 80-20, they're 70-30, they're 90-10, right? Some days they're 99-1.
I was going to say they're what they need to be for that day.
Right? And the other side recognizing that they have to pick up whatever it is that the other person can't right now, or that the other person is going to be there to pick up whatever they can. And that checkbook, right, is derived, or the deposits that come from that in that checkbook are derived really from those relationships. And so for me, it's been developing quality relationships with people that I trust, that I've learned to trust over the years, right? Because understanding that not everybody is evil, like my stepmother, right? Or her family, or any of those people. Not everybody's evil like that, but they still exist. Mm-hmm. But finding those people who are on that good side, on the other side of that, and developing those quality relationships so that the deposits become more than necessarily the withdrawal. Not saying we're not making withdrawals, right? And it's not saying that some days we're not coming close to zero balance in there, but it's working to keep it above it.
So you have a few years left at most, but you're in a position where you can, and it's not as much as it used to be, but you're in a position where you can affect some change, at least on your battalion level. Mm-hmm.
what is your position? How are you affecting change for these young firefighters, and how are you trying to set them on a path to where they'll be successful for 30 years or 20 years or 15 if that's all they want to do?
Yeah. The first thing that it comes to mind for me is financial security, right? Like the stress of life is compounded when it comes to financial security. It's funny, we're back on a checkbook again. But the truth of the matter is if you're constantly worried about money and where the next, car payment's going to come from or any of that stuff, it's just adding more stress to your life, both at home and at work, right? Like you feel like you have to work more. And if you're at work all the time, well, then you're not at home and your employer's just wearing you out and you're tired of being here. And now you don't want to do this anymore because it's something you have to do instead of something you really enjoy doing. So one of the things that I think is critical is that people have some financial security. And honestly, the one of the biggest things that I push with people right now is I sit down with them, especially all these new guys coming out of recruit school. First thing I ask them, you're in the 401, right? Yes. Okay, great. 457? Yeah. Are you doing a percentage or a flat amount? If they say a flat amount, I tell them you need to figure out what percentage of your check that flat amount is, and then change it to a percentage so that every time you get a raise or anytime you work overtime or we have a holiday pay, you're getting a little extra put in there and you're not missing it. Because if you set it at $10 and it's 5 years before you ever make a change again,
Right.
you're
Lost
not going
out.
to that $1 million they said you were going to have in recruit school when they were showing you all those numbers. You're not going to have that. You've missed it. So get it to a percentage and then work on trying to get that percentage increased, right? But the biggest thing is, and I tell these kids, I'm like, look, I know that you're 20 years old. You're not even thinking about 50 yet, but you need to start thinking about 50, because what I really want for you is I want you to get to 25 years of service and 50 years of age and have a choice. If you want to walk away at that point, you can walk away and not have to worry about where's tomorrow's check going to come from.
Right.
If you want to stay because you're having a great time, great. That's your choice. Don't get to a point like I did where you get to 25 years and go, oh shit, I have to do another 5 years.
Right.
Right. Like financially, there's no way I can walk away today because nobody followed back with me. Right. They told me they did a great job in recruit school saying I needed to sign up for this and I needed to put money away and I needed to do this and do this and I'll be a millionaire. But what nobody ever came back and did was come back to me and go, where are you? Are you still doing that? Or have you increased it? What do you mean you decreased it, right? So the advice I give them is hire a financial advisor. Listen, I know it costs money. Yes, it absolutely costs money.
Right.
But the one thing that I've noticed is that every firehouse that I've ever been in has a financial advisor in it.
Yeah.
The problem is they're advising you on what's good, what's working for them.
Exactly.
Right?
Right.
A lot of these guys are talking about plops and what they're going to do with their plop and this and this. And I'm like, that's great. But my financial advisor said, not so much. Maybe we'll talk about it about 6 months before you retire.
Right.
The other big one was as soon as we hired a financial advisor, he goes, I'm going to need you to stop maxing out your 457. That's contrary to everything I've ever been told by anybody, any one of these firehouse financial advisors, right? He's like, max that out, max that out. My financial advisor's advice was, listen, you have this debt over here. He goes, if you get rid of that debt, you won't even need that money.
Right.
He goes, focus on getting rid of that debt first. And then we can go back to increasing this if we want to.
Yeah.
Right. The reality though is that that's somebody who's looking out for you, that really that's their job.
Right.
Is to look out for you. Right. So get that financial security, get yourself on a path where you're not worried about whether or not you're going to be able to make your truck payment at the end of the month, you're going to make mortgage, or Christ, you're not having kids because you can't afford it, right? Is that get somebody who understands it. So that's probably the first piece of advice that I try to give all these kids. The second one is learn to disconnect from work. You're never going to disconnect from the emotion, right? Me taking that call home with me, that was going to happen regardless. And fortunately, like I said, my wife stood by my side. She made it through. But don't wait for that to happen to get your spouse involved or get your significant other involved or even your family, right? Just anyone, get them involved so that when it does happen, they're just as prepared.
Right.
That recent incident I talked about, I asked the person, I said, "Hey, have you called your wife, tell her you're coming home?" And they said, "No." I was like, "You need to call."
Yeah.
Right. Don't just walk through the door.
It's out of the ordinary. Let's give a heads up.
Right. Because when you walk through that door, it's going to hit, right?
Yeah.
And so I actually wound up calling for him and walk that through, right? Like, hey, here's what's going to happen. He's going to come through the door. He's upset. This is kind of what's going on. Just let him
Right.
vent, right?
Yep.
And so we stayed in communication throughout the week, but having a spouse that's prepared or having a significant other or somebody at least in that relationship tree that completely understands what you're doing,
Right.
and what you're going through and understands that they're not going to have the answers for you, but at least they'll be there.
Right.
Yeah, I kind of forgot where I was.
So you've got financial education, disconnect from work.
Oh, the emotional side. Right. So literally like the physical side of the department, right, is that the department's issued me a phone, some sort of communication device since I was a technician 2 in the training division. And for a long time, I would carry it around with me everywhere I went. It was always on. Anytime that the direct connect would ring, I would answer it, right?
I can hear the chirp.
Is that there are times where I come home and my work phone goes on my nightstand and it goes on the charger and I don't pick it up for 4 days.
Right.
Now, all my guys know and have my personal number, and they know that if they absolutely have to talk to me and I don't answer that work phone, they call my personal phone.
Right.
But that they also understand that that's if you absolutely need to talk to me. This isn't a, hey, I put leave in for 2 months from now. Can you go in and approve it? Phone call, right? This is my wife, something happened at home and I have to be off tomorrow. Okay. Right. Like that part I get, and I'll absolutely bend over backwards to make that happen for you. But if you call me about something from 2 months from now or something that you could have emailed me about and I could have answered when we come back to work, I'm going to block your number.
Yeah. There's a break of trust there.
Right. So that's kind of what I mean by disconnect from
Right.
work, right? Learn to not always pick up that phone. You're not being compensated to be there. Then don't be there.
I saw somebody post something on, I forgot what platform it was, but it was a picture of an email that their CEO had sent them. And his signature block said, "This email was sent according to what was convenient for my time. Please respond with what's convenient for your time."
That's amazing.
And that you just don't see.
Yeah.
And so it's a great way of putting it. Because I sent this at 12:01 in the morning doesn't mean I need you to respond at 12:30 in the morning. I need you to respond when you're ready to respond. Obviously, they have some parameters set in for let's not wait 2 weeks to respond. But still, that taking that pressure off an employee is important. And I think that I've talked to a lot of people, and a lot of people will tell you, it's not the calls. It's not the calls that get us. It's the bullshit that gets you. And so that's what you're saying. Disconnect from that, because that'll help when you come away from work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I just, like I said, I mean, I remember anytime it would ring, I'd answer the phone.
Yeah.
Right. And it got to be too much. And I'll say that the further along in the organization I've gone, the more that is. In fact, I was just out of town helping another jurisdiction with an assessment center. And even though I was at work, I wasn't really at work. And my phone the emails just kept piling up and piling up. And I went back in yesterday and I spent the first hour and a half of my day going delete.
Yeah.
Delete. Delete. Oh, I should read that one. Delete.
Yeah.
Right. It's like there's just so much, so much. And if you don't leave that behind, if you don't take time to leave that behind and focus on your hobbies, your family, your travel, whatever it is you want to do, then it's just going to continue to pile up and you're going to feel trapped by it.
I was going to say that because I had the list of things you told me you were going to work. You would kind of craft with your younger firefighters, and that what you just said leads to the other two is be present and be aware of each other.
Yeah, it's huge. I think I said something along the lines earlier, right? Is like, I don't know what you're feeling at any given moment, right? But I've been on those roller coasters enough to know that you can't ride it by yourself all the time. And so recognizing when people are on those roller coasters, right? Being there for your people, being there for each other, right? You don't have to be a battalion chief to recognize that somebody's struggling, right? Is that we go through recruit school with people, and I came out of recruit school with 23 other people who I feel like that most of them, anytime I need to, I can pick up the phone and give them a call. In fact, I still talk to some of them who have already retired and left the department on a regular basis, just to touch base, right? And like say, hey, what's going on in your life? How are you doing? Because they do the same thing for me. Like they call and they check in, like, hey, how's things going in the department? How's things with the family, right? It's having those connections and being there for one another on a regular basis and understanding that we're not going to get through this alone.
Right. Yeah. And I guess in our department, and I think this is going to hold true for most departments of size, let's put it that way. We have multiple departments within a department. So what you're saying is a wonderful thing, but how does a department your size or bigger or even smaller, it doesn't matter. How does a department get buy-in for something like that on a department level, not just a battalion or unit level?
If I'm being honest, I don't know that, I don't know that you get this same thing across the board, right? Like we have 3 shifts, and all 3 shifts, there are people on the other 2 shifts that I've never met, right? Having been around for as long as I have, I came into a department that was 125 people.
Yeah.
Everybody knew everybody. We were off on the weekends, so we'd go on tubing trips together as a department.
Right.
Right. Now, you're lucky if you can even get a battalion together.
Shit, you can't even get your unit together.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Okay.
The drive that we make.
I was trying to.
Yeah.
I was trying to be a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I'll call you on it. You can't even get a unit together. Forget a station.
All right. I've been cold. Yeah. So, right. We struggle just to get that type of thing together. So I don't know that you ever get a department-wide consistency on it, right? Is that I think that from a department standpoint is being able to continue to provide the resource. And really that's, I think as a department, that's what we can do. The Resiliency Center, right? But we can't stop there, right? Is that we need to make sure that we're staying with whatever the trends are, whatever's coming about, right? Like you can look at generational differences and the way that the different generations react to different things. Is that I have an easy time reading somebody who I've known for 20 plus years or 30 plus years, almost 30 years, right? Versus somebody I've known for a month or 2.
Right.
Or even somebody that I've never met. So from the department standpoint, it's providing those resources and ensuring that the shifts are looking out for each other. And really that starts, I guess, for us, the division chief level, right? Is that the division chief being aware of what the battalions are dealing with, the battalion chiefs being aware with what their individual battalions, and then all those unit officers, station officers and unit officers on down the line. But it goes right back up, right? Is that I've had conversations with some of the officers of higher rank in mine and literally just been like, how is so-and-so, and call them by their name. And I actually had one almost break down in tears one day because there was something going on that day, but it was just checking in.
Right.
I've known you for 30 years. And when's the last time you and I sat and had a conversation about our families?
Right.
When we worked together 20 years ago?
Right.
Right. So I'm sure you're going to edit the crap out of this part because I'm pretty sure I'm repeating myself right here, but from a department standpoint, it's making sure the resources are provided. From a shift, battalion, unit, or station and unit standpoint, it is that constant looking out for each other. It's constantly having those conversations with one another just to open up the door, right? Because if we're not having a conversation on a daily basis, then there's no way I'm going to know when you're struggling, right? And I know we have a tendency in the fire service to pick on the weakest link and that person who, just they want to dish it out, but they can't take it type of thing. Is that we just need to approach that a little more carefully, right? Is that because that one day then that person actually needs you, you're not going to recognize it. So it's making sure that those conversations that you're having aren't always about the joke. It's not about the weak link. It's actually having a conversation to find out where somebody is so that when they're outside that normal, you can recognize.
All right. So how do you make yourself open and available and that people are comfortable enough to say, I need to talk to you?
I would say that I probably rely a lot on the leadership skills that I've acquired over the years, including the bosses that I didn't want to be like.
Mm-hmm.
I make sure that if there's something personal we need to talk about, or there's some sort of, I'll say disciplinary thing. It's not necessarily discipline, but maybe you just didn't do it right or the exact way it should have been. Nobody got hurt. Nothing was harmed by it. But we're not going to have that conversation in front of everybody, right? We're going to go over here and we're going to talk about the personal things that are going on in your life, because I'm not putting your dirty laundry out here for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I will stand in front of everybody else and take a beating from you if that's what you need to do, right? Just so that you understand I'm here for you and for whatever you need. Obviously, one of the things I think I know I've said for a long time is I've never demanded anybody's respect. I have to earn that. I understand that. The one thing I do demand is you don't disrespect me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
There's a big difference there.
I've earned that as a human. I've earned the opportunity not to be disrespected by you, right? But I'll earn your respect. Just give me an opportunity to do it. What were we talking about?
How you make yourself available. But I think you covered it.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, this is what I'm going to do for you. This is what I expect. And living up to that.
Yeah.
That's a big part, is don't just pay lip service, actually follow through.
That's, and that's just it, right? Is I don't know if there's a how you make yourself available until you can prove you've made yourself available.
I was going to say, there's definitely a way you can make yourself unavailable. And if you prevent that, then you're well on the way to making yourself available.
Well, and I think that's probably the key, right? Is not being unavailable. And it's kind of like we talked about, right? With the personal phone and work phone thing, is that they all know they can call my personal phone, and some of them do, right? And some of them, the other part of that is I have two phones. I have a work phone and I have a personal phone. I don't do personal business on my work phone, and I rarely do work business on my personal phone. And part of that is that if we're going to have a conversation, you and I, and it's going to be one where you're going to be frustrated and upset with the department, we're going to have that on my personal phone. Because guess what the department can't do?
Right.
They can't walk in and give me your phone.
Right.
This one, the work phone, they absolutely can. And say, give me that phone, and I have to hand it to them.
Right.
So my guys all know that, right? Like there's been a couple conversations that have started on work phone and said,
transfer.
I'm going to text you from my other phone, and we'll pick the conversation up there, right? Is that, no, this was going down a path where I think you're going in the wrong direction, or maybe you're going in the right direction. You're just not going to be successful with the way you're going about.
Right.
Right. So yeah, just making sure that I'm not unavailable, I guess.
So we're looking at, we're about 2 hours into this, believe it or not. So let's get to those last two questions I always ask everybody.
Okay.
When's the last time you had a sense of awe?
Sense of awe. I don't know if I remember that question. Let's come back to that.
All right. What's a book do you want to recommend for the audience? Something that's going to add some value, some entertainment. What is, and you don't have to limit yourself to one.
No. This gets us back into a whole nother conversation, right? Is I'm big on personalities, and not just truly understanding personalities, right? Reading people and how to, what their needs are going to be,
right?
As compared to my needs. So I think that the book that I recommend to everybody, in fact, I just recommended this to the group that's working on some leadership stuff for the department, is Dr. Taylor Hartman, The People Code.
Okay.
It breaks personalities basically into 4 colors,
Mm-hmm.
puts those generalizations together, right? It certainly isn't, this is you or this, right?
Right.
But it's generalizations. The whole Myers-Briggs disc assessments, all of those things fascinate me, because every little bit that I can learn about personalities and what they need just helps me that much further.
Right.
Chris Gott, who recently left the department, is working on a project and has a tool, assessment tool that he shared with me before he left. And I guess the department is looking at potentially using this, but it's basically 2 pages of questions, right? They're just adjectives that describe you, right? The first one is describe, how do you think people expect you to be at work? And you check all these boxes, and then you get to the next page, and it's, okay, how are you actually, right? And
Right.
it's the same words.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Like, you check this on this box, but that's not you.
Right.
So you don't check it here, but down here you didn't check it, but that is you, right? And you check it, and it develops this personality profile.
Right.
Well, then they can compare people.
Right.
So they compared me with my previous BST, and I'll be damned if it wasn't spot on.
Right.
Right. Like, and I'd worked with him before, and it was our relationship to a he. And I'm like, yeah, like, I understand that that's what he needs, and he understands this is what I need. And this is how we were so effective together.
Right.
So yeah, if you can learn personalities and understand personalities, you can pretty much work with anybody. Right. And yeah, I would say that Dr. Hartman's The People Code, you don't have to read the whole thing, just get the main sections out of it, and it goes right along with personalities.
It's funny, going back to personalities and tests, we used to do, and I'm not sure what they even do anymore for a psychological evaluation coming into the department, but mine was 1,600 to 2,000 some odd questions, right? And I got to this section, and every once in a while it says, would you rather go out at night or stay in? And it's like, no, I want to stay in. I don't like people. But I knew this job was people based, so everything that was people based, I answer. And so we get into to see the doc, and he goes, "Well, you did a little too good on this part." And he's like, I said, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, because if I'd answered truthfully, you wouldn't want me on the job.
That's funny.
So, all right, your time's up. What's a sense of awe?
Man, there's just so many, right? I would say probably the most recent sense of awe would be the grandkids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In what way? Being born? Or just explain that, because I have my own answer, and I want to know where you're going with it.
I would say born to every visit, every time I get to see them, right? Like Aaron will tell you, the grandkids are coming over. The shoulders drop.
Yeah.
The heavy sigh, right? Here we go again, right?
They're disrupting my day.
But man, when they walk in and they're like, Grandpa, the older ones, right? They're walking in, Grandpa, you're like, all right,
yeah,
this is worth it, right? The infants, yeah. The great thing about it is, now you hold them, and when they start to cry, you look over and you're like, hey, this belongs to you.
Yeah. So for me, I agree with that, but the way I relay the story to people is, do you know Tommy Hunt? He's on B shift in the department.
Yeah.
He just had a baby, and I know that feeling. My son just had another one, and I know what they're going through as a father. You go, oh my God, that's my kid, and now this is half of me, and I'm responsible for this child. But for me, when I hold a grandchild, I go, holy shit, that's my legacy.
Right.
There's a difference almost between, this is my child, this is my legacy.
Yeah.
And now this is where a true legacy starts, because then when they have kids, it's still from me. And it's just, to me, it was harder for me. That was a sense of awe when it comes to grandchildren.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of a legacy thing versus a child thing.
Yeah. The other positive on that is now I get to look at my son who has a son and be like, here it comes.
My son is destined to be a girl dad. So three girls. And my daughter had, my first grandchild was a boy, but everyone else has been a girl after that. So,
yeah.
but yeah,
I know that feeling.
Thank you very much for the conversation. I appreciate it. We'll wrap up, and I'll say thank you very much, and we are out, sir.
I appreciate you, brother.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Things We All Carry. Head over to the website, thethingsweallcarry.com, for show notes, resources, and to sign up for the newsletter. Until next week, take care of yourselves and remember to check in on each other.